One of the things that I want to talk about, and I'm curious to get all of your thoughts, is both through my own consulting and through the Foundry. Like one of the topics lately has been narrative. So strategic narrative, category narrative, whatever you want to call it. I've had a couple of interesting things lately where we are thinking about what do you actually try to include in your narrative, and like what do you actually need? What's too much versus just the right amount? I find a lot of times when people think narrative, they think this big manifesto. So they think that it has to almost be a written article in a sense that is like a story. It needs to be written in a way that is almost like a polished blog post. And I've recently been working with someone who used AI to do it. So they created a narrative, used AI to do it. You know, I'm sure you've all used AI. The output, I think AI wants to put out something that's impressive. And so a lot of times it's wordy and it's verbose and it's length. Length is almost quality in the eyes of AI sometimes. And the feedback that they've gotten was negative when they first shared it with their company. And because the person was forced to read a long document, it's almost like we asked for a narrative and now I have to read and decipher this long document in order to get the narrative out of this. And they're like, very clearly, this was written by AI. So the thing that came to mind for me and the thing that I think about a lot lately, especially with AI, and let's say in the case of a narrative, really at the end of the day, there are certain key things you need to have when you're trying to understand what is your narrative or even positioning too. But it's like there are key ingredients. When I think of a narrative, I like April Dunford's, the sales pitch book where she splits it up into there's the setup and the follow through. And when I think of the setup, there are certain things like you have what's the shift that's happening? Why does that matter? What's the problem or what's keeping people from, basically what's creating winners and losers, right? Like what's the problem out there? Some people are going to change and they'll win. Some people are going to lose, and what's going to happen to them? And then this unique insight into or a unique perspective into what does a solution to this problem actually need to look like? And then there's the follow through, which is if people agree with your unique insight on how this problem needs to be solved, then the follow through is just explaining to them how your solution works, right? And showing proof and helping them understand the benefit. And I find that you can actually get the point across of that in a short amount of words, right? It can almost be laid out in a pretty simple structure where it's a couple of sentences for each one. But I find when you're asking AI to do it, it's like blowing it up into this big long wordy blog post. And so I'm just curious for all of you here, have you worked on narrative or is this something that you've been working on recently? And to what extent are you using AI or it could even be for messaging and things like that? Because I know like Ellen, a question you have today is
Mhm.
message. To what extent are you using AI versus to what extent are you kind of figuring out the ingredients yourself first and then getting AI to help you from there? And I'm just curious.
I can start because I think there's like two pieces to this for me. So, for answering the first question of just like thinking through positioning, messaging, and where to use AI, right now, I haven't been using it for a ton because I am inheriting a lot of product marketing functionality that I hadn't necessarily like touched before at a
Yeah.
company that is a startup that is traditionally tribal knowledge everything. Everything is tribal knowledge. There's no solid documentation on things, or if it is, it's like one slide in a deck from like 5 years ago that no one is really sure where it lives, but they're constantly like referencing or iterating off of. And it's made it really difficult to like leverage AI outside of transcripts when I can get them from like the sales and account teams of like, I think there's one piece of like, if I'm feeding you all of this data, what are you seeing that's like familiar that I can start to use as pillars and kind of drive from there? But like, it's actually crafting something. I feel like I'm in the point of creating all of these resources and trying to like document these things that I could then leverage the AI for and be able to say, like, hey, looking at these, what are things we can start to build from it? And I feel like I'm at that like ground zero point of creating that stuff to pull from because our product is in a very niche space, which makes it really difficult we can't just consult and be like, what do you think broadly? Because we've tried that and there's no understanding of the space whatsoever, which is why we're pivoting so much and working on our repositioning for everything. Because I'm like, oh, the internet doesn't understand our space and none of our competitors have a good digital presence that's explaining our space. So if we can fill that gap, then we're going to have a real competitive advantage because nobody else is doing so. So that's kind of like the one piece of it. But in terms of like actual narrative itself, most of my background, or maybe I should say where my heart lies previously, was always in events. Spent a lot of time with events and prepping teams on site and everything. And you need to have a short and sweet and understandable narrative for a broader company audience to absorb it. Right. So I'm thinking of the idea of like, if you have someone in a booth who's having a conversation, that could be a tech or product person who's there to give demos, that can be the salesperson, that can be an account manager, that can be marketing. And if there isn't an understanding more broadly of like what the narrative of the company is, and that's not easy for people to like digest and anchor onto, then like you're consistently having different people hear different messages at like every single step of the journey, instead of saying like instead of being anchored on what's important. Oh, you've talked to somebody before, I can move you to the next step of thing that's important, versus like now I'm hearing a whole new explanation of what your product does. And we had just done an exercise for this in March at a company meeting where I was like, write down like how you would describe round trip to someone right now. It's like, and had the whole company do it. And like where there was similarities was almost alarming, because it's like not even where our product really focuses anymore. So it was just a really interesting exercise of like why this positioning work is so important, because it's like, look, we've proved the internet doesn't understand what we do or what our niche is or what our competitors do, and now we've just proved internally that like outside of our exec team and like sales and marketing, the company doesn't actually like have a handle on what we're doing, which is kind of how I was able to leverage getting buy-in for this, right? Because it's like this is a competitive advantage, but also like we can literally look and see that like the folks internally like can't talk about our product.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so, yeah, if people internally don't understand how to, aren't consistent in how they talk about
Mhm.
it, and they have so much tribal knowledge that you talked about, it's like, how can you expect something that's pulling from like outside information and transcripts to do a good job of it? Yeah. Yeah. It's the, and so, even when you're figuring out your positioning right now, it really, I want to think of things like your narrative or your positioning. It does kind of boil down to, it's almost like decisions that you're making.
Mhm.
Right? And so when you're trying to define your positioning, it's really just trying to document, hey, here are key decisions we've made around who we're targeting, right? Problem we solve, why we're different than all these other alternatives, why that matters. And it's almost, and so it doesn't need to be worded in any particular way that's compelling. The point of positioning is just to get clear on, hey, here are the decisions we've made around our strategy. And then once, and so I think that sometimes if people are relying on some AI to try to spit that out, it's you're not going to get. You're just going to get like a wordy thing that sounds nice, but it's not going to have anything. A lot of times you're not at that stage where you need something that sounds nice. You just need to get clear on
Mhm.
those decisions. And so, what I found in the case with that one particular case where they went with an AI written kind of document first, it's not at the stage where you need that. At that point, you just need to get sign off and buy-in on, hey, are we all agreed on these key points? And they don't need to be long. You just need to agree on the facts or the that strategy. And then from there, you can say, okay, well, let's use this to create a blog post for our website, or let's use this to create messaging for our sales team, or use it to create copy for our homepage, that sort of thing. And then maybe you can start to use some automation or AI to help you do that stuff. But I think that, yeah, sometimes I think what we need to remember is the early stages of these things are just really strategic decisions that we need to be really involved in and not try to automate. Like, this is the stuff you need to spend time on. And so, Ellen, it sounds like you just finished going through a process of figuring out your positioning.
Yes and no. Part of why I wanted to like hop on this call here is because, as I mentioned, like I have experience with messaging, but I wouldn't say that I have a ton of experience with developing like company positioning.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I was like so excited to discover Jetpack and like be able to like dig into and see examples. But where I've been spinning my wheels a little bit is like I got the company level positioning, but
Yeah.
we are a weirdly niche market. And part of that, for the first time, I even have a list of all the features. Like literally, like we part of that process was like even just like getting people to sit down and like list all of the features that are like in the product because it didn't exist.
Right.
And I think where I'm like spinning my wheels a little bit is like I have company level positioning. I understand competitive differentiation and like where we can sit there, but I'm having a hard time on like the next step of like, is it digging into the various like target personas because we do serve a product for transportation companies, for health systems, for health plant like so it's like is it the next step going there? Would the next step be like digging more into the specific product positioning a message? Like it's almost like I see too many paths of things that I could choose and I've been having a hard time like anchoring on what is the next thing to tackle. Like, okay, we got the company level. I have like experience from the past couple of years of working here, of developing stuff and fighting to get positioning. So I have notes on a little bit of everything and I'm having a hard time like making that decision of like what's the next most impactful place to start.
Yeah. And I think this is a really good topic, and I'm sure probably all of us have dealt with this. And I was thinking about it when you had sent in the question originally. And one of the things I thought about was how often do we create messaging that really has it's not actionable? There's no immediate use for it. And if we worked, if we thought of it from the other direction, which is how's the messaging going to be used once you create it? And so I'll ask you that. So when you create this messaging, how is it going to be used? Who's going to use it? What are they going to use it for?
So part of this is just our web presence and our website has been so bad for so long. And we finally took off some technical stuff that was keeping us from like being able to do some upgrades and push out some new pages. So a lot of this is going to cascade immediately into like I mean, I feel like with this group, it is a little bit of a support group in that, like, you understand we are a start. Like, this is ad hoc. Instead of being able to sit down and do a full website revamp that I am outsourcing to someone else, I am literally like, high priority pages. Let's start updating. Let's start optimizing for AEO and like starting to kind of like build the understanding in the niche and capitalize on the fact that like the market is shifting very dramatically in this year in the last 2 years. So like part of it is like a lot of what I'm doing I can immediately put into practice of just like okay, updating if we're doing health system, we did all of this messaging, we're updating the health system page. We're doing something product focused, we're updating the product page. And it's kind of all a little bit up to me in the sense that we did the work, the buy-in to say like, yeah, we need to focus and make these updates. But I almost feel like I'm throwing things at a dartboard. Like I don't know that I have an understanding of like exactly what the like homepage is going to be first. I have the company level messaging for that. I have some like I feel like that piece is set. But then
Yeah.
as I start to think about everything else that needs to be done, you hit that overwhelm of like, okay, there's so much that needs to be done. And
Yeah.
I have no idea when I have only X number of hours a week to work on this, like what is going to move the needle the most? Like, what is
Yeah.
that like, I do have some idea of traffic in terms of saying like, okay, some of the core pages that we think would have the most traffic do have the most traffic, but like, it still feels a little bit like I'm guessing and I hate guessing. Like, I think it's
Yeah.
just, I feel like it as a data driven marketer, you're just like, I want to make the right choice.
Yeah. I get it. It's tough because yeah, it sounds like there's a bunch of directions you can go in. So you could do things by
Mhm.
use case. You could do it by persona. I'm sure you probably have a boss who's saying, "Hey, we need persona and use case pages and product
Yeah.
pages." And so can you go do those? Right. And so to to have a messaging, let's say a messaging document that covers all of those isn't really realistic because
Mhm.
it would have to be one, it would either be really broad or and what I probably would do in your case is I would have a messaging document for a persona, right? And
Yeah.
it would be, if you're this person in this type of company, chances are you have this challenge you're in this situation and you have this problem you're trying to solve. And this is the messaging that we have for that particular like situation, person in that situation. And then that's what I would use, say, to write that landing page, to write copy or email copy, like emails for that person. If we were
Yeah.
going to, if you were creating, say, a dedicated pitch deck for that person, that sort of thing. But who knows how many of those you might have, right? So let's say you have a lot. You do need to get to some point where you are prioritizing. Unless your only job right now is to do that stuff, and you have the. I don't know how I get these things to happen, but your only job right now is to do that stuff, which is not. And so I do think that, yeah, you're like a couple of things you've looked at is what's the traffic to these different pages on the site? Or maybe have you tried talking to your sales team about which types of, like, which persona they speak to most often? Or another one, which I think is, I've done this recently too with working on messaging for a client of mine, is thinking about for this particular like ICP, what are the, you could call it situations, use cases, or problems that they have. So
Mm.
the question being, what are they trying to do when they get to your site? And usually it's to solve some sort of problem, or they have a use case that they need a product for, right? Or forget what the third one I said was, but either way, they're in a type of
Mm.
situation, right? Something's happened, they need something. And so then when I'd done the messaging for it, I even started with like, this is what they're thinking. And I just had a little quote and it was like, I I'm stressed out because I have this problem and I need to fix it. Let's say an example. And
Yeah.
I would think of what's the situation that they're in. And so it started with problem or a use case. And then from there, you're saying, okay, why do you need to solve that problem? My messaging was basically, this is the problem. This is how the problem as they describe it, a bit of a description of the situation they're in. And then it was what's the, like, why does this matter? Right? What happens if they don't solve this problem? And then it was teeing up our solution. So it's saying like, here, here's how we solve that problem. This product, this feature, here's the capability, and then the benefits and proof. So but it was done in a way where I was saying, okay, you know what? This messaging is going to be used on a landing page that is targeted at that person who has this particular use case. Or it is going to be for a sales rep who usually has someone who shows up to a call and they ask the question of what brought you here. And then that person says, I have this problem. And so
Mm.
it was trying to think of what are the most common things that we see when someone comes on a call with our sales team. And here are the 5 things that they're thinking or saying, right? Based on our experience, either come in with this problem, or this problem, and then we can create messaging for the sales team to be able to have to address it. But it was trying to get to that point of, I want to create messaging for a particular use for our team. And so it's either going
Yeah.
to be for the sales team or it's going to be for a landing page or a piece of content. And then you're asking questions. So then you'd ask the sales team, for example, hey, what are the most common people you're talking to? What are the most common situations that they're in where you would need messaging to respond to them, or what we'd want to tailor the pitch deck to, or a piece of content to, or in your case, landing pages. So it'd also be worth asking yourself, what are the most common things people might be trying to solve for, or thinking, or situations they might be in when they land on our site? And then that's one way you could try to prioritize, to tell
Yeah.
yourself that there are 3 pages on the site that are most priority right now.
And just be focusing on what drives the page, because that at least gives me something concrete. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
I'm
Uh,
curious what other people think though. Like, anyone else have thoughts on that? Is anyone else in a similar situation to this? I'm curious, or has been in the past.
Yeah, this is resonating with me, Ellen, because we are in a little bit of a similar situation where we're trying to create a category. And I feel like we are kind of one step ahead. Like we've kind of got our narrative. For the most part, everyone's kind of singing the same song. Everyone roughly explains it the same way. And now moving on to kind of what's next. And we're kind of deciding that a new ICP is going to be our ideal person. So my kind of next step is going to research that person. And one kind of small tactical example that kind of comes back to Jason, what you were talking about with using AI for these kinds of things. So we have been, we kind of decided, okay, we've got like a couple, we've got messaging coming from our brand, like from the marketing team. Let's get like our CEO and a couple other kind of like thought leaders talking about this messaging online and giving them some material to go talk about it. And so I have been using AI to do that and set up kind of a project like in Claude where it's like, okay, here's our narrative. Here's how this person typically writes and speaks. Help me draft LinkedIn posts, based on like, are they maybe responding to something somebody else said? Are they like reposting something they found cool? Are they just sharing a new post or new article that they found? And, what are their comments on it? And AI is really helpful for it. But to your point, Jason, like it's only taking us so far and then it all kind of starts to sound the same. So the point I've gotten to is I'm stepping back and being like, it feels like there's a bigger like story to be told, or maybe a better like formula or like plot for how we should have our founder, talking about our category creation and like telling this story, so that I'm kind of at this point of like, how do I make a better plan for him to
Mhm.
go out and share some his thoughts and opinions on this category and like raise some more awareness of it from that perspective.
Mm, that's interesting. So you want to do more founder-led marketing, and you
Hmm.
want to give him the messaging that he needs to be able to go do it.
Yeah, and AI is helpful, and yeah, it definitely works for like a little bit, but it kind of just becomes it quickly becomes like, hey, like here's something cool I read, here's how it relates to like what we're doing,
Mm,
kind of it. Now it's a little bit more like, how do we make this a little bit deeper, a little bit more robust? Yeah.
Have you read Building a Founder Brand
Mm-mm.
of Gerhardt? It's actually it's a pretty decent book, and I think like it might help you fill in some of those gaps, or at least ask the questions of your CEO that you could build into that AI project that would fill,
Mhm.
because it's like very specifically around the idea of like the founder led brand, and like how like tying in like the founder to the narrative and all of that in a way that I think might be like, I don't think it's going to solve your problems, but I think it would give you the questions to fill in the gaps with the AI to perhaps like retool that a little bit.
Mhm.
mm.
Mhm. That's helpful. What's it called again?
I think it's building it. Let me pull it up. I think it's Building a Founder Brand. It's Dave Gerhardt.
Yeah, I think it's just founder brand.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it right now, and I think it just says founder brand is the big bold thing on the title. But if you
Yep.
search Dave Gerhard founder
Yep.
brand, you can
Found
find
it.
it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's one the like hearing you say that, and then Alan hearing you talking too about it right now. What you're trying to do is update landing pages. I do think sometimes it's challenging when I've tried to create a messaging doc and then you try to shoehorn it into these different things you're trying to make. And sometimes one of the easiest things to do is if you got to create landing pages and you have a certain structure to your landing page, it's almost like skipping that messaging document step and just starting to create an outline of that page and say, what is the messaging that I want to use on this page? And it can be, you might say, oh, but what's going to happen then when you go to write a blog post? It's so yes, maybe having some like you do have your positioning that you would lean on in that case, but it sometimes we create these messaging documents, they're not useful for anything. Versus if you started right now and you knew the main use for your messaging is going to be a landing page, then just think about that and just say to yourself, okay, our landing pages follow a particular structure. And so I want to make sure I have the ingredients that I need for this landing page. So if you follow the structure of in your hero, you want to make sure that you are, highlighting your positioning and you want to have a clear call to action. And then you want to highlight the problem, right, in a very clear way. You want to introduce your solution and you want to make sure that that solution has three core capabilities and a couple of features underneath and a benefit of each of those capabilities, right? Or like three capabilities, a couple, yeah, that's what I said. Three capabilities, a few features that allow those capabilities, and then a benefit of that. And then you want to have proof. Like you're very quickly starting to essentially get a messaging document, but you're making it immediately applicable to something that you're going to use it for. And so then if you need to, for you, Catherine, if you're doing founder led content, then you're thinking to yourself, okay, you know what? This is going to mostly be used to create LinkedIn posts. And then you're trying to say, okay, well, what are some of the things we need to always include in our LinkedIn posts? We need to, right? So it's not to say that need to have a templated LinkedIn post, but sometimes LinkedIn posts follow a pretty similar format. And then you're trying to say to yourself, you know what? Okay, so a good LinkedIn post from our founder is going to be very clear with like a very opinionated point of view.
Mhm.
So let's get really clear on what our founder's opinionated point of view is and make sure that anytime he sits down to do his weekly dump of video recordings that we're going to put into his content, which is, say, a str- common process for that sort of thing, you are just going to be pulling those things out of him.
Mhm.
Right? If he doesn't have like a very clear point of view on something, you're going to be like, hey, I need you to have like, what's your thought on this? Or, hey, why does that matter?
Yeah.
Or what's the problem that people
Mhm.
like you say this, but then what's the problem with that? You can start to pull those things out because you know that that's the type of messaging you need for, or the type of content you need for your post.
Mhm. That's helpful. Yeah, get it a little bit more specific.
Yeah.
I was gonna say something we've kind of been experimenting with that's not exactly messaging, but we were kind of trying to make a brand voice, like document and some guidelines to try to help make sure things within the business like all sound the same, even though they're coming from different teams. And we turned that into a skill in Claude.
Right.
So that's been kind of nifty if you could refine that and then you can put anything into it and say, hey, edit this with the spotlight brand voice and see what if it can spit stuff out that at least sounds consistent regardless of like where it's going.
Yeah. Yeah. The it's interesting too when you think about AI because it's like even the way that you put things into AI, it's the formatting can be different. Like you can take what might be in your messaging doc that you create for people, and then what you put into AI would be more formatted like a skill or an MD file. And I'm sure, how did you go about creating that? Was it a matter of taking something and then putting it into a format for AI, or
Yeah, so I did, I had, like, never made a brand voice document before, so I did, like, brainstorm with AI to figure out what I was doing some research, but I didn't really like what it was giving back to me, so then I was kinda like, "Okay, you know what? Let me just make this really human, write this myself, like, I know our
yeah,
core values and how people sound and do that." I did use it to help me kinda aggregate, what's similar about these examples? How do we sound different depending on the scenario? And so then kinda had this a little bit more handmade document, and then, yeah, in Claude, you can, I think it comes with a skill building project. So you can say, help me turn this into a skill. Kind of tells you what it needs and talks to you and asks you questions and you give it this document and then it turns it into the MD file for you to save it as a skill. And then I shared it with my team so they can kind of start kicking it around and seeing if it works well. And then I think eventually if it works well, we'll roll it out a little bit more broadly and you can share it with everybody at the organization.
Ironically, I had to change my brand guidelines because of AI. Because when it turned into a skill and we plugged it in, I have a my leadership team is all ex-consultants. So there tends to be a lot of there was a lot of verbosity in a lot of the writing that was happening. So I was trying to get people on the idea of like brevity of like use like let's not use any extra words. We want to make sure we're speaking clearly. And like that was included in what I uploaded to like be the skill. But now the output sounds so much more AI because its idea of like brevity is like short, 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 short. And I was like, oh, I have to literally like remove things out of the skill to make it like what the people needed as guidance. The AI is taking too far in the other direction.
yeah, yeah. I've seen that even with trying to use AI for my own stuff too. It's hard, and yeah, you're constantly being like, oh man, you find out these new things that AI does,
Hmm.
and you're just like, all right, I need to remove that from every one of these.
Yeah, that's what we did too. It's got some lines in there about like remove M dashes. Yeah, try to help with some of the cadence.
Classic one. The it's not this, it's this is a
Yeah.
big one. Yeah. So I dropped that link in there. I found that was helpful. It's basically a simple there's a recommended process in there for how to go about creating one of these about me files. So one of those like
Mm.
how I speak kind of files for I guess yeah, skill or to use in any agent tool. So you can use it in Claude or different ones. But I sat down and went through that process and it's been pretty helpful. I've used it in some of the things that I've written with. Hard to know based on all like you literally sit down for 30 minutes and you're dictating all the answers to these questions. And it's hard to know how much of it is actually using that. But there's some good questions in there, even just to get you to think through. Even if you were just trying to put together a voice document for like, here's how we speak as a company. It's interesting. But then the output there would be just a file you stick into AI and you never look at. But yeah, it's I guess Ellen, to go back to your original question though, do you feel like, what's your next step now? So you're in this situation, you've
Well,
got so many roads to go down.
I
You
do think it's either a immediate the decision I haven't made, and I think what I need to do and what I feel inspired to do after this is to honestly just start like putting things on paper and then deciding if that is going to be like persona based or kind of use case based, right?
Mhm.
Like almost just start like I think I have this idea that like things need to be in a framework instead of just like putting stuff out and putting it in a framework later almost. So like I think that to me is like I'm like, okay, I think the direction is it's instead of going with the full map, I have two pretty solid paths. And I think if I start just documenting what I have in my head, then that kind of helps make the decision of which one of those things to actually tackle next.
Yeah.
But honestly, Catherine, part of your convo was bringing up some other stuff that I'm genuinely wondering if anyone else has had this challenge. Because again, I think so much of like startup stuff is like things aren't owned in the department because everyone's wearing so many hats and like executives have so much more passion about some of this stuff than maybe you would see in a larger company. But like one of the things I've been struggling with is like our sales team and our leadership team is really enjoying like grounding themselves to these like transportation strategy pillars. My company also like never met a framework they didn't like. Like it's just we like making our own, we like borrowing other people's, just frameworks galore. So they've been anchoring on these like pillars of a transportation strategy thing to kind of like roll up different features and things to the product. And all of that does make a lot of sense. But what I'm having trouble communicating more broadly or where I'm running into friction is there's this idea of like, great, we'll put this as drop downs on the website. And I'm like, people don't come here looking for that. That's not how people are searching or interacting. It's not like it is a great way to ground the sales pitch. And like, there's definitely a mapping we can do of like features and everything else. But like, they're not coming here to go to like a drop down that's going to be like workflow, this. And I'm like, those aren't things people are coming here looking for. And I'm wondering if anyone else has run into friction with that, where there's like this one idea of like we've attached ourselves internally to this specific thing that we think works, but that doesn't actually match up to like the inbound buyer's journey of how someone would be coming and learning about your product and like ingesting what you do and how you've been able to navigate kind of that friction or that hurdle.
Yeah. Great question. Has anyone been in that situation? I know at Chili, like when I was at Chili Piper, everything was so product focused. Like you come to our site and the nav was based on products. And unless you knew exactly what you were looking for, so it just didn't align with the way that people, to
Yeah.
our discussion earlier, what is someone trying to do when they come to your site? They usually have a problem they're trying to solve or some job they're trying to do. Yeah. Do people feel like like, let's say sites, just because we're talking about websites.
Yeah.
Do people feel like today your website is a good matches what a buyer would be looking for when they get there?
No. I think ours is still a little inside out. It's starting to get a little bit more outside in. I was
Mm.
gonna say Emma Stratton, who writes
Mhm.
Make It Punchy is like her business, right? She has a framework she calls VBF to start with value prop and end with the features, and that's like my North Star for
Well,
messaging.
yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to
Yeah.
think of someone who's, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say not my current company, but where I was the first marketing hire at a really small B2B SaaS company several years ago. And their website was horrific. And I wanted to start with that. And they were like, people find us word of mouth. Like that's how we get all of our business. We don't need to have a good website. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
and they were so resistant to change, and so I think on one hand, part of being a product marketer is to try to influence where you can, But at the end of the day, if you are not the CEO, you are not the be all end all, and you can only do with, so much with what you've got. So I feel like on one hand, you just try to do your best and make changes where you can and make the changes that are allowed. And on the other hand, it's like, if you can't, you did what you could.
Yeah. But hey, it's good realization. Sometimes, yeah, you only do so much
Right.
convincing, or
Yeah.
sometimes you do have to kind of go along and know
Yeah.
when to fight your battles.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you can bring in data to support your side,
Mm.
you can make a stronger case. But at the end of the day, if you are not, if you report to someone and they have more say than you, then it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Something you learn when you've been doing product marketing for a while, eh? Ellen, do you mind if I pull up your site?
You can, it's garbage. You're more than welcome to. I can give you some pages that aren't connected to anything that are better.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious. Yeah. So if you don't mind, if you'd rather not, it's no big
No,
deal. But
it's fine. Though I just want to caveat that it is exceptionally bad, and this is well known, and that there's the pages that are there, most of whom have not been. Again, you can pull up whatever you like. I will pull up a couple of links that I think are more
yeah,
telling
sure.
of.
Why don't you share it? Share what you want to
Okay,
share what you're happy
let
with
me
sharing.
pull
But
some stuff up, but I want to caveat that until a few months ago, for some reason, somebody built an essential part of our product into the theme code of our WordPress website. So it crashed every time I tried to update a plugin, every time I tried to do anything. So my main goal of last year was getting a secondary site made where that form could live on its own WordPress site. So I could finally start making changes at all to this website, because that's the level of what we were dealing with here. So
well, you've prepped us. We're expecting something pretty bad.
it is pretty bad. Here, give me 1 second to pull
Is
up.
anybody here a fan of WordPress? Because anytime I've ever tried to work with it, I've always failed miserably. WordPress really irks me. But I've met people that are huge fans. This is all we'll use. Where do you guys stand on WordPress? Or what do you
I've
use?
I've had the same experience as Ellen. We used it at Chili Piper. Every time I tried to update it, it crashed. It crashed. Our site was down. It was a nightmare.
I would say that I don't like it, but that I am not a web developer, and I know how to use it from an old blog, HTML, MySpace day sort of things.
Mhm.
For me, I'm it's functionally accessible,
Mhm.
but that's about it.
I haven't really met a CMS that I've been a big fan of. You know,
Yep.
Yeah, interesting.
they've all got something wrong with them.
All right. So this is our current website.
All right. All
It
right.
is
Right away, I think you're too hard on yourself, but it's not that
Well,
bad.
I'm like, this looks better than what I was doing.
Yeah. If you hover over solution, I'm curious. Is it better than yours, Robin? Is that what you said?
Yeah, no, this is 1,000 times better than
Health
what I was
systems,
doing.
health plan. Yeah.
that
And,
it's
and
to
oh, sorry, go
caveat
ahead.
you, I happen to know how out of date all of the messaging is. Which when you come to our site and start to go through the process of who we're talking to, it's not our key ICP anymore. Most of the buyer's journey that you have makes it seem like we are an ambulatory solution first, whereas we actually work better plugged into a command center or transfer center in healthcare. So it's there's a
Oh,
little bit of a I am exceptionally hard in the sense that I know this is no longer talking to who we need to be talking to, if that helps.
so I want to pause you for a sec. And so, you're at this point, you're so far up to this point, you've been talking about other pages on your site and whether we want to do messaging by persona or ICP or use case and that sort of thing. But the most important page on your site is always going to be the homepage. And if
Mhm.
you're at a place right now where you've done all this great positioning work, you feel very confident on it, but your homepage isn't, you don't feel it's reflecting your product in the right way,
Mhm.
is what's, yeah, to me, the thought would be this would be priority number one. Wouldn't even think about the other ones until you feel really solid about this one.
Fair, fair. I think for me, we need such a graphic overhaul that I was other things were a little easier to tackle because we haven't nailed down the new look and feel either.
Okay.
So I think that's been my hesitation for diving in, but you're right. Like, you are right. I would say this one that we last year went go to market with a major integration, and it was the first time the company had like done a true go to market function for any kind of like new product release, which in this case was like a broader integration. So this is a little bit more like some challenges in the sense that language had to be approved by the partner. So like some things are a little more techno jargony than I would have preferred, but it is what it is. But I think this one's a little bit better in terms of just like calling out the specific value props that we were trying to focus on, and being like more in brand in terms of like how we're doing some of the graphics, doing more like process graphics because we're positioning ourselves as like your partner for life. Like as you're changing and growing, we're able to help you adapt with your workflow. And I
Mm.
feel like having more of like that process graphic or that kind of like feel of we're understanding more than just like the day-to-day pain points. Like we're going to show you the back end piece of it.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah. Who's coming to your site normally? Like if you were to make a guess, or a best bet is, yeah, if you were to say our site is mainly for this one person, because they usually are the ones who are.
it's hard to say one in the sense of it's certain hospital personas, right? So like they're coming from a Google search where they're looking for a patient transportation solution. They're putting out an RFP. So it could be procurement. It could be like the person who asked for the RFP. It could be just general command center or EMS owners. It could be a
Mhm.
case manager. So it's a lot of like health system adjacent personalities, or it's transportation companies.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's two very like distinct paths, and even the transportation companies then verge off into two distinct paths, which
Okay.
is frustrating because it's like we have transportation companies that are opting in to like join our network, looking for rides, kind of having a freemium interaction. And then
Yep.
we also have transportation companies who are like, I need some sort of online ride booking platform to manage how the hospitals are calling me for rides. So
Okay.
essentially, then they're buying it and rolling it out to their hospital customers, which
Okay.
is more of a direct like revenue piece.
Gotcha. Yeah. Like it sounds like there was kind of three different audiences there potentially, right? There's the people who are coming from the healthcare
Yeah. And then there's two.
organization. And then
And
two
I
different.
would say the healthcare, if you're a command center or a transfer center, your needs are different than some of the other folks that are looking for a
Yeah.
solution. So I think it's four. I think there's like two branches
Yeah.
under care and two branches under transportation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so this is helpful to be able to kind of see it as you talk about it.
Yeah.
I think that asking yourself those questions of who's coming to the site and what is it that they're trying to do, and making it easy for the people who land there to know, okay, this is the place I need to go to based on what I'm looking for. I think if you approach this, if you look at the site in that way, I hope what you'll end up with is
Mhm.
probably a more prioritized list of, all right, these are the pages that I really need to focus on, and then you can start to think about what kind of messaging do I need for these, and start to work on it. And like you said, if right now this is the main use for your messaging, instead of trying to create some messaging framework and then try to smush that into a page, you might as well just start with the page itself, and then figure out what you need from there, and then it's not that I would say start by writing copy, but start by thinking through, okay, what is the message I want to get across on this page? What are the key things we need to say? That sort of thing. And then,
And honestly, that
yeah,
should be applicable for the other stuff too. Like,
it's
not that it
probably what
can't
you're
grow
going to find.
and change,
Yeah.
but like if it's like this is what somebody needs to get out, we want them to get to this page and we need them to get this thing out of it to want to take the next step, then like honestly, even as we're crafting other stuff, there might be things we need to add in, but like that is the
That's
that is
the meat of it. Yeah. And so then you could take that and, if you want to put it into a framework so that it's easy for other people to use for other types of content, then that's great. but at least you get an immediate use out of it. And then the other thing I would just get you to think about is I could work on other subpages, or I could make sure that our home, just do a simple look at the traffic to your homepage versus the traffic to these other pages and ask yourself, what is the one thing I could focus on right now that probably have the biggest impact? And if you feel like your homepage is confusing people, that'd probably be one of the things I would focus on. Yeah. Or that would be the main thing.
And honestly, this has been so helpful. Thank you all. But this has
Wow, this
been
is
so
great.
helpful because it's like I'm also realizing that what is holding me up from doing the homepage is like design, look, and feel. And so like if the issue is being asked to turn this stuff out fast, get all this stuff out, then like honestly, one of the first steps I need to be pulling in a designer for some of this stuff. Like it's actually like unlocking the idea that like some of these things I haven't been doing. It's because I don't want to have to do the mental load of the writing, the positioning, all of that type of stuff. And then also like the design, the graphics, what we're going to plug in here, here, and here. Like some
Yeah.
of that is like, okay, I could actually be tackling all, you're right. I have the stuff for it. It's the most important page. I could write the messaging for the homepage. And actually the next step is like, what is the design stuff support that we need in order
Yeah.
to make that change a reality? It's not even what's the other pages, what's the other things to tackle. It's actually a more practical resource.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, and then if your homepage is improved, chances are you'll probably get people who then make it to the next step, which might be these other subpages.
Mhm.
And then you got another problem to solve. But then at least then you're like, oh, we need to solve this because we're getting lots of traffic to these pages.
Yeah.
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 This has been fantastic. I hope other people didn't have I know we focus on this mostly for the call. So,
Sorry.
Catherine, David, Catherine, I know you submitted some questions last time and I'd responded to them, but also so with 3 minutes left, but I'm curious, is there anything else that, you wanted to ask? I know you asked some questions as we went too.
No, this has been really helpful. And yeah, it's just really helpful to hear everybody else's experience and that they struggle with the same problems. And yeah, Jason, thanks so much for what you shared last time. I had asked him questions about personas and was like,
Yeah.
do product marketers do personas? How do you do it? How do you make it actionable? Like these just go to die in a slide deck. So he shared really helpful resource of here's ways to make it a little bit more actionable. And so as I mentioned, as we're kind of like trying to pin down this ICP and learn about these things and then eventually maybe make the stuff usable, that is something that's like in my back pocket. So
Cool.
no, super helpful.
Nice. And David, I know you didn't submit a question. You probably just wanted to check out the first one and see what it was like.
Yeah, I'm just stepping into the water, but this is great. And messaging is top of mind. If I had a question, it would have been around messaging and frameworks. I think
Yeah.
the thing I took from today is that maybe it's good thinking about the end. What are you going to use that messaging for? I'm thinking of like, you have to have your positioning and then you have to have a messaging framework. You might think like, we're kind of like you were talking about like a lot of tribal knowledge, everybody has a concept of their messaging, but like, there's no tied down like documented thing. So I'm trying to think of the hierarchy there, but I haven't really thought of like, how does that get applied? So
Nice.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Useful.
Honestly, it's helpful too because like any product, I go like, oh, what's my messaging framework? Because you feel like the work is creating a messaging framework, but the work is like what you do after that. So just motoring through that stage, because it's not until you try to apply it, you really. So many times I've created a messaging framework and then I try to apply it to something and then I go back and I change a bunch of the messaging framework because you're like, oh, this is not right, or I can't work. This doesn't work in here well. So yeah, trying to practically apply it first to something. Because that's what, even when you get into creating messaging for sales, a lot of the most valuable messaging things for sales are when you get asked this, say this.
Right.
It's not a messaging document. It's literally like FAQs and objection handling and stuff like that. So yeah, it is a good thing to remind yourself of like, hey, it's thinking about how the messaging is going to be used first.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But Catherine, I might want to talk to you about the persona stuff because that's
I
also
was just
top of
gonna say,
mind.
I love just the resources in the library, like in the resources on Jetpack.
The persona stuff, actually, no. It was Catherine had a good question around have you created like persona materials? And I had shared, I don't know if you have the video link there, Catherine, that I had sent you. Handy.
I can get it.
Drop the answer there. But that's a good one for a future topic just to cover on the call. And it was just the persona stuff that we had done at what was it, Clue. Yeah. it was again trying to just make it really practical to I think when we typically think personas, it's like, where do they hang out? What are the, this normal persona type document, especially what probably AI would spit out for you. Yeah, watch that video there. What I shared.
Because I will say my like least favorite thing is exactly what you said about like where they go to sorry, I know we're out of time, but they go to a PowerPoint deck and die.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there has to be a more useful, like our company uses Notion. I'm like, there has to be like an interactive, like better Notion template or something that I can use and embed into things where it's a little more like reminder.
Yeah. Yeah. And the one I shared with Catherine was a deck. So it's tough. Like decks are like main medium to communicate anything to sales people.
Mhm.
I've seen people put them in Notion. It is really just dependent on go with the flow of where everyone goes anyways.
Yeah.
They all go to Google Drive, put it in Google Drive. If they all go to Notion, put it in Notion. If they have some tool they use, don't try to force them to go somewhere different. Adoption is always the hardest thing. Getting people to actually use this stuff. Cool. This was fun. Ellen, I know it's like putting yourself out there and sharing this stuff and all that. But honestly, these calls are not nearly as valuable if people like you aren't willing to kind of share what they're working on.
Oh,
So,
and I know that I only have like a dangerous working knowledge of what I'm doing. So all of this is so helpful. Like,
great.
so
Well, cool. I hope you come to the next one.
yeah, thank you. Thanks
All
everybody.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Bye.